This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovators Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
I want to start off today's show by sharing with you a quote that I came across that was not so much startling, but put everything into context of what we're experiencing today. The quote is, "I believe that there is a widely mistaken interpretation of what is happening to us. We are suffering from the growing pains of over-rapid changes, from the painfulness of a readjustment between one economic period and another." Let me share with you that again. I believe that this is a widely mistaken interpretation of what is happening to us. We are suffering from the growing pains of over-rapid changes, from the painfulness of readjustment between one economic period and another. Now, I don't know about you, but this is what I've been reading every day in the paper through stories of new technologies and new innovations and new medical breakthroughs, all the changes that we are constantly facing. The success of technology innovation is forcing a rapid change on all of us. And look, I'm in this game. I've been in this game full-time for my entire career, and I'm struggling just to even keep up with what all the new stuff is. I could spend hours a day just trying to track the latest and greatest, newest things coming out. What's interesting, though, is this quote that I just shared with you was from 1930 from John Maynard Kaynes, the world-famous economist. And he was talking about the cause of the Great Depression. Now, you could pick up this quote and you could apply it through all of societal history. You can go back to the Industrial Revolution when there was these big gyrations and changes as things became mechanized. So factories got put in place, the role of steam and automation, and people who used to be in the agricultural sector of the economy all of a sudden being displaced with machines. We are talking about really these kinds of changes, and the rapid adoption of innovations can be overwhelming for society. Think about it. The iPhone is celebrating its 10-year anniversary, and just think about the impact that it's had on society. And keep in mind that the iPhone wasn't even really the first smartphone. You know, it spawned a whole rash of copycat products, and the role of the smartphone plays in how we communicate. It's no longer using the phone for its initial purpose of making a voice call. It's all of the other applications and the way we communicate and the way we share and the way we stay in touch, the way we get our news, all has been transformed. Society has adapted itself to the adoption of these new innovations and these new technologies. And that is what we're going to talk about today. It's this impact of once we adopt a new technology, a new innovation, how does society adapt? And what is the role of the innovator of thinking about this adaptation? How do you adapt to these new technologies? Now, in this case, we've seen just a rash of these new technologies that we're facing today. There's a big discussion about artificial intelligence, and is that a good thing or a bad thing? Autonomous vehicles, the commercialization and privatization of travel to space, the potential mission to Mars from SpaceX, all these types of things which we had never would have anticipated 10 years ago. We are now facing them as a society, and how do we adapt? Adaptation is how we, society, and communities adapt to how we use these new innovations and these new technologies. It happens over time. We first adopt, and then we adapt. Society, businesses, governments are absorbing and trying to adapt to these new ever-changing landscapes, technologies, and innovations. But in most cases, the adoption is what is driving how we adapt. Think about it from an Uber and Lyft and its impact on the taxi industry. The change and transformation that it has had from the standpoint of forcing entire industries into either restructuring or no longer being relevant. But these adoptions also have some form of unintended consequences. So look, in the cities where Uber and Lyft are prevalent, fewer and fewer people are buying vehicles. Why do you need to buy a car when you can call an Uber and very quickly get from point A to point B? And when you added up all the costs, it still is cheaper than buying a car, paying for the insurance, maintaining it, all those kinds of things. And so these adoptions of new technologies have these unintended consequences when society adapts to it. Online retail is another one, right? If you look at Sears, JCPenney, there are 1,000 retail companies on the financial watch list for possible bankruptcies because of the disruption of online retail. Rather than getting up and going to a store and buying something, ordering it online and having it delivered to your front step. Now, quite honestly, the ones creating these new technologies and innovations don't give a care for the companies they leave behind. We, as innovators, tend to reward disruption. Wow, so-and-so came up with something really great and they totally disrupted an industry and laid their competitors, down. They just totally dominated and wiped them out. Now the question is should they? Should innovators really care about the disruptions they cause? Should they just worry about how things are adopted? Or should we as innovators think about how society will adapt to these new technologies and what the long-range impact is going to be? Now, in my case, I went through this in the late 70s, going into the early 80s with both my father and my father-in-law, who both worked or related to or were part of businesses related to the steel industry in northeastern Illinois, northwestern Indiana, Gary, Hammond, where the big U.S. Steel works were located at. Now, information technology and new innovations came in that basically wiped out the U.S. steel industry back in the late 70s and early 80s. Did those people who were inventing those innovations think about the impact or how to help society adapt? No, they were worried about the disruption. So it was the Japanese, what they called mini mills, that came in and wiped out the U.S. Big production, big steelwork operations. Did they care? No. Should they? I don't know. And that's really what I want to talk about today. And I'm interested in getting your thoughts and your feedback on this because I think as innovators, we just can't wipe our hands and just not think about it. We need to spend a little bit of time about how whatever this innovation is that I'm creating, how will society need to adapt? Or how could society adapt, both for good, but also maybe not so good? How do I think about possible unintended consequences for the innovation? I'm not saying then don't introduce it. What I'm saying is if we think about it a little bit, can we help society be prepared for these disruptions that are coming into the marketplace rather than just think of it as a hand grenade? I've pulled the pin, I throw the hand grenade into society and let the chips fall where they will. So the question comes down to is, should the impact on the companies, their shareholders, their employees play a role in the strategy for these new upstarts? What about government protectionisms of jobs and roles, like taxis or union jobs or whatever? The governments quickly try their way to adapt is to put protectionism up. And is that a good thing? I actually would argue not, but we'll talk more about that. So for example, on the Uber and Airbnb, finding themselves fighting the local and state governments in an attempt to kind of protect constituents' jobs and communities, or should they just recognize that adoption and the adaptation of innovations and technology is just part of the circle of life, and they should just let it happen? As it's reinforced in the John Maynard Kaynes quote, it's happened before, and it will happen again. This isn't the last cycle we're going to go through, right? And most of us thinking, look, in the 80s when I was the young entrepreneur with a bunch of startups, I did 13 startups before I got to my first IPO, right? We were all out there, we're going to disrupt, thinking, okay, my dad didn't adapt, he was an old fogey, he couldn't make the transition into the new technologies, okay? Now, I'm an older boomer. I'm in my mid to late 50s, right? And I think of myself as being pretty tech savvy. But you can see some of these transitions that are coming that even if you think you're going to be able to make those changes, you're not, when these cycles come and go. So what's going to happen? It's happened throughout society in the past. It's happening now, and it's going to continue to happen. And as innovators, we need to take some form of responsibility to think about the impact on society. How is society going to adapt to the innovations, to the technologies that we are going to introduce to the marketplace? So again, that is what the topic for today's show is going to be. So hang in there. Let's have this conversation. And I look forward to hearing your feedback at the end of the show. So stay right there. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovators Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Before we hop back into today's show, I just want to do a quick shout out to one of our sponsors. Zoom has been a sponsor for this show for over 2 years. It's a tool that we've been using every day to keep our team connected from all over the world. We use it both with the radio show, how we bring guests in to do the interviews, but also it's how we connect to our teams scattered out all over. And in my day job as a CEO for a research and development lab, it's a way that we keep our team together, knowing all the projects and going on, no matter where you are in the organization. So check it out. Best video, best audio, and by far the best collaboration technology. Zoom's mission is to make you and your team happy. Keep the friction down to allow you to do better work, better collaboration. So check it out, killerinnovations.com/Zoom. Get you a free account with up to 50 video collaborators being able to engage and participate in the work that you're doing. So check it out, killerinnovations.com/Zoom to get your free account. So let's continue on our conversation around adoption and adapting to those new innovations and new technologies. I want to focus this segment of the show talking about social networks. Just think about how quickly social networks such as Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram have taken over as the new norm when it comes to how we communicate. Now, I've seen it with my own kids, starting with AOL Messenger. Now, my kids were teens and preteens when the whole AOL phenomenon, when we all got flooded with all those CDs. And I saw how it was changing their friends and how they communicated. Now, it starts off with just really typing in what you would normally say on the phone, the ability to have conference calling, so a bunch of people all engaged simultaneously. And it did allow for better communications with friends and family, staying connected over long distances, a little less obtrusive of having to pick up the phone call, being able just to use these new social media platforms. And again, messaging platforms, social media platforms, I'm kind of lumping them all together. Now, some of these changes, though, that has driven some of this is this willingness to overlook the concept of privacy. You know, you're putting things out there. When you say something into a phone, odds are it was not going to be recorded. But everything you type, whether it's a text message, an AOL instant message, all the way through to the social media platforms of today, is kept for prosperity. People can cut and paste it, keep copies of it, and therefore you basically have your entire audit of things that you communicate being preserved somewhere. Now, what has been driving some of this social media bandwagon? Well, one is people saw what you could do just from the standpoint of improving communication, but it's also, I'm going to argue, a little bit of what I would call FOMO, fear of missing out. Every time there's a new social media platform that gets launched out there, everybody is rushing to get onto that platform and to try it out. You don't want to be that person at the party or at the office where someone says, "Hey, have you seen this new social media platform?" And you don't want to be the person that goes, "Well, no, what is it? I didn't know anything about it. What is this thing all about?" So it's this kind of driver for everybody to kind of try to stay up on what's new. So FOMO has part of this drive of this herd mentality of everybody's got to drive onto the new social media platforms. It also gets driven a little bit by generations, right? Facebook started off as kids in college. And then, people's aunts, uncles, and parents and grandparents then took over Facebook. So what do the kids do? They move over to Snapchat, and they're taking on the Snapchat applications. And that'll happen again. Now you're seeing adults hopping over onto Snapchat, and brands are on Snapchat trying to use it as a messaging platform to tell their brand stories. And the kids are going to move off to something completely different. And so this is kind of this whole drive of adoption, the adoption and the acceleration of adoption for the social medias. Now, the real question is how has society had to adapt? Well, just the sheer number of people on the social networks, the redefining of friends and family. What's a friend and what's family now in the social media circles? I've got people that I've connected to on Facebook and LinkedIn who I've never met in person, yet I'm seeing pictures of their kids or their grandkids' birthday parties being posted. Things you would never have shared pre kind of this whole social media, but now it's kind of socially accepted with a much broader definition of, quote, I am a friend of somebody, when in reality you've never met, you've never even had a meal together, you've never met face to face, but, quote, they are a friend. We've adapted. And it's also this social acceptance of sharing, how much we share, our willingness to share, the kind of information we share, marital statuses, whether you're going through a divorce or separation or, struggles and people posting those up there. The level of sharing that the society now has adapted itself to with the adoption of social media. It's also measuring status. You're measuring status by how many followers do you have? How many Twitter followers do you have? How many Facebook? How many LinkedIn? Right? We're using numbers as a reinforcement that people like me because of how many followers I have. And again, we're adapting. And also the ability to skip the middleman when it comes to information. Do I trust my friends and the information that they're sharing online more than other sources, such as the traditional news sources of the Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, whoever? And so, the question becomes then with this social media, and I'm relying on my friends to kind of think like me and feed me information, is what becomes the role of the news media. Now, the real question is what is the impact on society? The level of sharing online is beyond what most people would ever say in person. We'll say things that we would just never say face to face because we have that protection behind the application. We'll say political discourse, cyberbullying, and trust me, cyberbullying is not just about kids in school, but I've seen cyberbullying actually play itself out in the professional realm, even on LinkedIn, but also on Facebook, etc., where people will pile on and use social media to bully or intimidate other people. And exploitation. It redefines trust. What is trust? In a social media world, we've adapted to this whole concept of trust. And also, what's the difference between real and fake? Now, the ultimate question is could we have predicted these changes? As innovators, could we have predicted the fact that we're going to build up these networks and people are going to have this new level of sharing and conversation? Could we have predicted things like the emergence of fake or false or misleading news, cyberbullying, exploitation, intimidation? And what would be the role of innovators? Should we or should we not look beyond kind of that horizon to try to figure out what some of these unintended consequences will be from the innovations that we delivered? Or do we just pull the pin on the hand grenade, throw it into society, and let the chips fall where they fall? I'm arguing that we do have a responsibility as innovators to think about the unintended consequences. And we're going to continue this conversation through the rest of the show, so don't go anywhere. You want to be part of this? I'm interested in hearing your feedback. So stay right there. We'll come right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovators Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
Welcome back. Before we hop into this segment of the show, I just want to do a quick shout out for another one of our sponsors, which is HP. HP joined sponsoring the show, a couple of months ago in support of providing us the technology into the new studio here in Colorado. This studio has been based on all new HP gear. Now you're going to say, hold on, Phil, you had a relationship with HP before. Yes, I was the Chief Technology Officer at HP for almost 10 years. Been gone for about 4 or 5 years. They've come back and actually reached out, and we've put together this sponsorship. Now, the sponsorship is not about driving money into the show. I've been funding this now for 13 years out of my own pocket to make this content available to you free of charge. With the sponsorships like HP and like Zoom, it allows us to free up the money to put into our nonprofit activities, which is things like Hacking Autism, an organization that actually got started at HP, and HP graciously allowed me to take it out and turn it into a 501c3 charity, along with Pioneer Education Africa, the schools that we are currently building in Africa. So the funds that come in free up those dollars now to be applied to the nonprofit. So we greatly appreciate it. If you want to check out some of the HP gear that we are actually using here in the studio, like a Z2 mini workstation and an HP Slice, and other devices, you can go over to killerinnovations.com/HP. Check out the devices. You can actually see the specs, and you can actually find out more information. If you do engage with HP, whether it's a small business, large business, or a consumer, let HP know where you heard about us from, that you heard about it from here at the Killer Innovation Show. All the support that we can give to the sponsors helps them support our work and support the charity nonprofits. So let's continue on our conversation around adoption and then adapting. What happens to society when a technology or an innovation starts to get this groundswell of adoption? Now, what I want to talk about in this segment of the show is around e-commerce, another example, or online shopping. The impact started with big box retailers, the Walmart, Costco, Sam Clubs, and how they impacted small retail merchants. You know, towns tried to prevent Walmart and all of them from coming into their community. They were going to wipe out the mom and pop grocery store or bookstores or whatever. So there was this big fight to prevent the big box retailers. Now, the big box retailers are being disrupted. So they came in, they disrupted the little guys in these communities. Now Amazon is coming in and disrupting their business. They're doing to the big box retailers what the big box retailers did. Now, this is an innovation. It's an innovation in business model. It's an innovation in supply chain logistics. It's a disruption, and disruptions can be pretty jarring. And in fact, not only are they wiping out the big box guys or putting them into a big hurt, but they're also finishing off taking out a lot of the small retailers. So I talked about in the opening of the show, there are 1,000 retail outlets that are currently on the financial watch list, meaning they are at financial risk for going bankrupt. These range from companies such as Sears and JCPenney, you name it. There's lots of them. You look at all the sports stores that have gone out of business, the bookstores that have gone out of business, clothing stores that are going out of business. We like the convenience of going to one place, buying in bulk, and getting a big discount. That's what drove the big box retailers. Now we like the convenience of shopping online, the ability to order it, and if you are a premium customer, you get these special programs where you get free shipping. You get all this benefit. Don't even have to even leave your home. Shows up at your doorstep, and also gives you the that convenience. Now, for the longest time, you didn't have to even pay sales tax. So you actually had the advantage of getting it at a cheaper price because Amazon buys even in larger bulk than the big box guys do. And they weren't subject to local sales tax. So as adoption for online buying started to accelerate, then we had to adapt. In this case, governments had to step in, state, local governments around taxing authority and how do you tax companies like Amazon. Otherwise, local tax revenue base in small towns, even larger towns, start to be heavily impacted. Now, Amazon has caught itself kind of in this grind and is now actually working it out to start paying some level of the taxes that are due that the local merchants have to pay. So therefore kind of leveling the playing field. Adoption got out way ahead, people hopping onto Amazon, and now governments are needing to adapt. Now, some businesses, small businesses, medium businesses, even larger ones, have gotten onto this bandwagon. Rather than letting this disruption totally destroy them, they got on the bandwagon. So there are entire businesses that are using what's called FBA, or fulfilled by Amazon. So if you've got a product or something that you're selling, you can actually warehouse it at Amazon. People buy it on Amazon. An Amazon person takes it off the shelf, sticks it in an Amazon box, puts a label on it, and sells it. It's your inventory, but it's fulfilled. You can also host your store at Amazon, where someone buys it, you get the order, you stick it in the box, and you sell it. So rather than just letting the steamroller crush their businesses, they are adapting their business models, how to reach customers, by taking advantage of what Amazon has actually put in place. Now, large and small retailers, however, have not adapted. Not everybody has jumped onto this bandwagon. And as a result, their businesses are being severely impacted as a result. Now, like I said, there's this rash of recent articles of the impact on malls and shopping districts and tax-based, impact. But in some cases, if you lived rural and you didn't have access to a store anyways, this actually solves a problem. Rather than driving 2 hours or 3 hours to get to retail, you can now order and have it shipped. Talk to the people in Alaska and what they've enjoyed from the ability to buy things on Amazon. Now, this has had a significant society impact. Given that retail is one of the largest employers, it's having a significant impact on pockets of society. You take out these big box retailers or even brand retail chains because of the risk of bankruptcy, it starts impacting the employment numbers. Now, we all state in surveys that we want to buy green, we want to support local retailers, but when we actually go out and buy, we buy on price. We say one thing in surveys, price dictates. Now, I'm not saying buying on price is a bad thing. We're all looking for value. And in some cases, we've created a vicious circle by where large swaths of the population are in lower paying jobs, and thus they must purchase on price, which then begins the circle all over again. We just need to stop being hypocrites and saying what we want X and we do Y. We buy on price. Price and time are the two biggest motivators for innovation. Can I save you time? Can I give you some convenience? In this case, ordering online and having it arrive. And can I give you good price? Can I give you good value for the dollars? Yes. That's always going to be the key drivers for innovation. Time and money. Now, could we have predicted these changes? Could we have had some forethought thinking about what the impact to these kinds of innovations on online retail? And could we have thought about what the adaptations were going to be needed, whether it be government and taxing authorities or jobs and alternative job creations, etc., to kind of smooth society as we adapt these innovations? Now, smooth doesn't mean slow. Things don't slow down. We're still going to be operating at these frantic paces, but how do we not so much slow it down, but how do we smooth our ability to adapt? And if we as innovators think beyond just simply disrupting and really think about, what are some of these unintended consequences that are going to happen from innovations and these disruptions, we can actually help improve and accelerate the adoption. If people see not only the benefit, but also understand what the consequences are, and we think about it ahead of time, we can plan for it. We can actually help people adapt much more smoothly than just waiting for the disruption and the throwing up of our arms and hands and doing the woe is me. I argue that as innovators, us just sitting here and, launching the disruption and not caring about the unintended consequences is just not right. We as innovators, if we're working on disruptions, need to think about these unintended consequences and how do we help individuals, organizations, companies, governments, society adapt to these innovations. Take advantage of the great things these innovations bring, but do it eyes wide open, not just wait to see what the consequences fall out at the other end. So with that, we're going to take yet another quick commercial break. When we come back, I'm going to wrap this all up in a conclusion and talk about what I think what's the role of us as innovators should be and what role we could play in thinking about these unintended consequences and the impact on society. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break. You're listening to Killer Innovations on the BizTalk Radio Network.
This is Killer Innovations, a show about ideas, creativity, and how you can innovate. Welcome to the Innovators Garage, where you learn to create your next game-changing killer innovation.
I think we would all agree that the pace of new innovations, new technologies continues to accelerate. It is not going to slow down. Now, I'm in the middle of building a second studio so that I can be more mobile and still keep up with my show obligations. And as we're speccing the equipment, now I just built the studio last December, the one that we're broadcasting from in Colorado. So as I'm building out this new studio, new devices are coming out that supersede things I just bought in December. And as I'm getting ready to spec a new device, within 30 days, a newer one is out, a better one is out. I can't keep up even with this pace of change that continues to happen. Now, those of us in the innovation game are motivated to get these new things adopted as quickly as possible. We want to have impact. The whole role of being an innovator is to have positive impact on people's lives, make their lives better, make them save, get some, better value, maybe reduce the cost of something because we can make it cheaper, smaller. We can make things do things that you just never thought were available. I'm all excited about autonomous vehicles because now I gain the 45-minute commute to be productive to do something else other than sitting behind and driving in a steering wheel and getting frustrated with rush hour traffic. We're, as innovators, we look to try to have change, positive impact in people's lives. And to do that, we need to bring those things in. We need to get them adopted. As I've said many a time, an idea without execution is a hobby, and I'm not in the hobby business. I'm in the business of getting those innovations, those technologies into people's hands. Now, we need to recognize that it's not all just about adoption, but how we as individuals and teams and organizations, society, adapt to these new technologies. How do we think about the change that it imposes on people's lives? How do we adapt them in ways that the innovators just never anticipated? Now, with this, putting together today's show, it's kind of forced me to take a step back. I've never really have stepped back and thought about what were the unintended consequences of some of the innovations and some of the technologies that we brought forward. Years ago in the early 90s, we were launching the very first GSM wireless carrier in the United States, OmniPoint in New York. And part of what my team we were working on was the very first prepay technology to develop. So you would go into a store, you could put $100 down on a prepaid card, and then when the $100 was used up, you went back in, you prepaid, your phone was turned back on. Now, we thought it was all going to be great because it allowed for a part of society who couldn't pass the credit check or didn't have a means of proving employment, etc., to be able to get mobile services. Prior to that, they couldn't get mobile services at all. Unless you could qualify for the credit check in the early 90s, you couldn't get a cell phone. So this was going to open up this great new communications technology to people who just never had access to it before. What we didn't anticipate as an unintended consequence, though, was all the people who do bad things, right? So you could blame me and my team for launching this whole concept of burner phones. You buy a phone, you put a minimum minutes on it, it doesn't have an account to it, so you can't subpoena it, you can't identify who actually has the phone, there's no identification that attaches the individual to the phone. an unintended consequence. Now, should we have anticipated that? Yeah, you could have argued we should have thought about that, but we didn't. We didn't take the time to think about all the possible unintended consequences. And that's what I'm saying here is as innovators, our work on our innovation doesn't stop at the adoption. We need to think about how society, individuals, teams, organizations, governments, the world as a whole, how we will adapt to whatever innovation. In this case, prepaid phones, great for opening up a segment in society, giving them access to a technology they would never have, with the unintended consequences of the illegal activities that same capability allowed somebody else to do, which has led to all kinds of law enforcement issues. But the path from adoption to the adaptation that society takes is not clear. And the impact may not always be so obvious. So the real question is so what are we to do? Well, we can't stop at adoption. We need to take that extra step. And every innovation project I'm working on going forward, and I would encourage you for every innovation project that you're thinking about going forward is think about how others will have to adapt. How society will need to potentially adapt if it's a true game changer, if you're totally going to disrupt. Don't let yourself or society be surprised by how it's adapted, how it's forced to change. If you think about social media and fake news and all those kinds of things that we've experienced through the most recent election cycle, I'm an employee at a big box retailer and all of a sudden my job's at risk because Amazon's coming in and wiping out my business. We need to think through the impacts, the change, the adaptation that we're forcing with these disruptions. So get ahead of the curve and help others get the full advantage of what it is you're creating by seeing what's coming and how to adapt. Just don't throw your hands up. Take ownership. We as innovators, if we're developing those disruptions, we need to help people to adapt. Now, hopefully you found this topic interesting. Maybe it's challenged you to think a little differently about how you think about the innovation projects you're working on. I would love to hear your feedback. Post a comment in the show notes over at killerinnovations.com or drop me an email, phil@killerinnovations.com. If you want to be part of the conversation around this and other kinds of topics on a much deeper basis, join the community. It's the innovators.community, theinnovators.community. Hop on over. There's a landing page, gives you all the information of how to become a member of the community. It's a private Slack community of innovators coming together to talk about all the things we're working on. So you want to check that out. So again, hop on over, show notes at killerinnovations.com, and become part of the conversation over at theinnovators.community. With that, we're going to wrap this up. Appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to listen. And all I ask is that as we do this as a way of paying it forward, that you pay it forward by telling others about the show. And so with that, hope you have a great week. Don't let the innovation antibodies get you down. Go out and change the world. Bye-bye.